We'll give it another minute or so for other folks to join. All right, we can get started. Hey folks, just a reminder, meeting's being recorded, be uploaded to YouTube shortly after. And your attendance in this meeting is a agreement to abide by the OpenSSF Code of Conduct. If you haven't already, feel free to put your attendance in the meeting notes. Okay. Okay, so nobody had anything for the agenda from last time, so I don't know if folks have agenda items for this time. As a reminder, the main things that we're focused on is getting existing salsa tooling to abide by the 1.0 spec. I've been inviting some of the folks from the Ghost team as well as some of the other teams to try and, if they can, attend one of these meetings so we can maybe just sort of talk through what that might look like, maybe just sort of swarm on a couple of the things and just sort of get that out the way. And then the other thing was around creating something like a generic API spec, which a few folks seemed interested in yesterday, also at the general salsa community meeting. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. As far as the salsa, as far as that like API spec thing goes, was supposed to go to the securing software repos working group to kind of talk through that. I went to the APAC one, was supposed to go to the EMEA one, but I got sick, so I wasn't able to attend that one. So I'm going to be attending the one that I believe is next week, and kind of go over just some general thoughts there. And that's kind of where we're kind of going to be going. For anybody who's joining now, feel free to add your attendance to the meeting list. So that's really about it. And then open it up to everybody else for other topics. Eric?
Hey, Mike. So quick question on this. So
Eric, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Oh, you're right. Can you hear me now?
Actually, hold on. Can other folks hear Eric? Oh, okay. Give me 1 second. I think maybe my my headphones might be.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. I apologize.
Yeah. Can you hear me all right now, Mike?
Oh.
Interesting.
I think everyone can hear you except Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll give him a second to rejoin real quick. So Yeah, it's not outside the realm of possibility that I had myself muted and I was talking. That happens fairly often, unfortunately.
You were fine. There is Mike.
Can you hear me now, Mike?
Yes, I can hear you now. Sorry about that.
All right, no worries, it happens. Yeah, so thinking about this a little bit and some of the work being done, all of the variant tools that this group talks about. Has there been any thought maybe, and the last couple of meetings, I think there wasn't enough people that showed up to have the meeting. And it's like myself and a couple other people without really a clear agenda, but kind of moving forward, have you thought at all about like the FRSCA project that's going on in OpenSSF, and maybe doing some potential merging of these tools with that project as well? Thinking about a broader SDLC type of salsa implementation, because they're doing some of the framework, but not all of it, to pull together a number of artifact specific components like signing and visibility, some identity components, but certainly not all the way across the board. But it seems like a good conversation point to really be driving home some of the core specs and some common specifications to make this more functionally capable for people. I don't know if maybe this group, being a tooling group and this being a tool, something that's trying to bring together some of these components, maybe it's worth having that broader conversation.
Yeah. So I'm also a maintainer on the Fresca project. That's definitely something that we'd be interested in exploring further. I think there's just some practical elements of just Fresca right now is mostly myself and like maybe a couple other folks who are working on it. Some of the original sort of maintainers had got pulled into other projects. But if we did get some folks who could sort of contribute back, that would be definitely something that we can push forward. And then in addition to that, I know some folks might not be aware that the OpenSSF has the direction for 2023 is one of the big pieces of the direction for 2023 is something they're calling the Sterling toolchain, which name pending, but where that sort of thing would be the idea here being that a set of tools configured with some glue code that could satisfy securing sort of general open source from development to production. Obviously with some caveats that, hey, every different, all companies are going to have slightly different needs, but where you might be able to hit some very, very specific, you might be able to hit some of some baselines. And so that sort of thing, and there's some conversations that are starting up there. I don't know exactly what the state of it is. I was going to follow up on that with some folks, but definitely very interested in seeing, like let's talk more of this end-to-end thing. Some folks have been talking about, like what could OpenSSF do to sort of say, here's how you secure, let's say, dev using something like Fresca or some of these other tools. This is how you would secure build, and then this is how you would secure, ending up in production or something like that. That's definitely something that a few folks have brought up recently and are very interested in. So I definitely would be interested in that. I just there's just some practical elements of finding the right people to start to build it.
Yeah, and I think from, I brought this up in OpenSSF about a year ago as a lot of the discussion around design and schemas and process is great. But for a lot of the end users, people who actually need to implement something more secure rather than build just technology projects by themselves, these are all impressive projects, right? But, you're going to have to integrate a number of them to make it an effective, secure development environment. So yeah, if you're going to have those conversations and that continues, please include me on those. I think more adoption and more contributors will show up if there's an end user goal to some of this and an integration point. So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a few folks had brought up also of not necessarily making Fresca the Sterling toolchain, but making Fresca sort of like, for folks who are not super familiar with Fresca, right? The idea behind Fresca was it was a set of tools combined together like Tecton chains, Spiffy Spire, and so on, and combined in a way and configured in a way to turn it into a secure build system. That implements all of the salsa stuff. It also implements some of the CNCF best, supply chain security best practices. It does, it does scorecard, it does all-star, it does all the, it tries to hit all the things, both from the perspective of as a project, is it doing all the right things to secure its supply chain, to secure development? And then in addition to that, as a build tool, does it help others do similar things? And so that, so that sort of thing seems to be, that goal is an important one that a lot of folks have brought up as stuff that they want to see more of. Is they want to see more like, hey, if Fresca is a build tool, can we also get a development tool or a linting tool, an SCA tool that's open source that, you can imagine, hey, when I go to push my code, this is what that flow should look like, to make sure that, bad actors can't push to our Git repo or whatever. And is there a way to sort of line everything up such that it, with as much automation as possible, somebody could at least get a POC of a secure end-to-end SDLC up and running in, minutes, as opposed to, tons of effort there. Oh, sure. Yeah. So the Fresca meeting meets every other Wednesday. And I will, it's on the OpenSSF calendar, but I'll just copy the, all right. I don't know. I don't have the ability to edit the meetings, but I will forward it to you. So it's every other Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern time, which I know also doesn't work for everybody. And also, once again, more than willing to switch some of that around as well. I like to find a new meeting that time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think if there was anything else on that front. As far as the actual Sterling toolchain stuff itself, I don't know. I keep pinging the TAC about, hey, what's the status of it? And they keep saying, oh, we're having conversations about what this thing might actually look like and what the working groups that come out of it might look like. But that's been happening since late December, because I believe late December they voted on making that the priority for 2023. But then as far as what that, what that actually looks like, I believe is still being debated. I'm trying to also myself find out, like, are these mostly closed meetings between the TAC and the governing board, or are these open meetings? I'm not sure yet. And when I find out more information, I'll post it in Slack.
Yeah, this is first time I'm hearing Sterling toolchain. So what's the mission again? Like provide a set of tools instead of guidance?
So the unlike, let's say, the CNCF, where the CNCF is very particular about not naming names of tools, because they don't want to pick, they don't want to be kingmaker, they don't want to pick winners, which makes sense, right? You don't, these are all open source tools and some of them compete with each other. You don't want to pick winners. The OpenSSF is taking a slightly different approach, still not trying to be kingmaker, pick winners, but the idea would be, hey, here is a Sterling toolchain. The Sterling toolchain should consist of these things. So as an example, this is just like, think of it as an end-to-end secure SDLC flow. So, just imagine, here's how we are protecting, let's say, developer endpoints. Here's how you protect this, this, and this. But then here are the tools configured in a way with some baselines that folks could just sort of deploy this. Now, once again, most likely your average company is not going to be able to just sort of pick up the
Right.
tool and just be like, oh, I can just start using it. You pick up that tool chain and just immediately start using it, right? Because everybody's going to say, well, hey, the Sterling tool chain uses, let's say Fresca as its build system, but I'm very deep into Jenkins. I can't use that. So there's still going to be areas where folks are going to need to plug in their own stuff, create integrations. But the idea is using glue code in some fashion, whether it is stuff like Q and languages like that, to help provide like a consistent configuration layer across those tools and provide a consistent sort of policy layer and governance layer across those tools so that folks can kind of say, oh, okay, well, the same sort of thing, if we're trying to prevent, just as an example, where, if somebody comes in and says, hey, we're not a Go shop, we prevent Go, we do not use Go, we don't blah, blah, blah. Great. How do you configure the tools to essentially enforce that at the dev level, at the build level, and at the production level? Right, where you say, okay, great, we can't run this tool or we can't run this thing. What sorts of stuff can you do there? And so that's kind of, if you take sort of the Fresca, the high level vision of Fresca, right, is it's a bunch of different tools glued together with stuff like Q to make it super easy to operate as a single sort of deployable unit. And so the idea is, could you do something similar just across the SDLC? Obviously, that comes with a lot of caveats because once you start including, once you start tying together, a handful of tools, it becomes a rat's nest. But that at least is the goal of this Sterling toolchain. That's about as much as I know about it. I've been talking to Brian a little bit on it. I've been talking to Bob Calloway, the chair of the TAC, a little bit about it. And once again, there's a lot of folks, a few folks from the governing board, like Jonathan Meadows, who are, they're very interested in pushing this thing. They're still trying to figure out exactly what that looks like from a project standpoint. Anyway, that's the Sterling toolchain in a nutshell. The way that Salsa probably fits into it is, as you can probably imagine, like, okay, hey, we have Salsa, so a Sterling toolchain would probably say, well, when you get to the build piece, like source to artifact, you say, okay, well, whatever is happening in here needs to be Salsa compliant. And then you probably would also say, well, dev tools might say, when I go to do ingestion, let's say pull down a dependency, for example, from NPM, you might say, well, we have a global NPM config that we give all of our developers that states that, this must be, the Salsa config, like the Salsa things that we're looking for. Like, we're only picking, I'm just saying, like, identities from these folks or whatever, right? And when we pull down SBOMs and yada. And then when it comes to the build, okay, cool. Are we building via Fresca? When we pull in dependencies, do those dependencies also have, Salsa attestations or something like that, right? Where somebody can sort of configure that policy. And then when it comes to something like a production thing, for folks who are familiar with, let's say, Google's binary authorization concept, so a lot of folks are talking about, hey, what could we do, for from an emission control perspective, whether that emission control is purely, in Kubernetes or just more generically, some sort of gating mechanism that also validates, like, does this thing have Salsa provenance that meets our policy or whatever before we kind of let it go into production. So that's kind of where some of the Salsa and Salsa tooling stuff would come into play as well. So that's, I mean, I don't really have anything on the agenda for today, so I don't know if anybody else had things they wanted to include or add in here. Yeah, as far as the Sterling tool, yes, let me go and bring up, there's some slides that were shared. Yeah. So this was the slides when it was voted on. It wasn't called Sterling Toolchain when that happened. But from, I guess, slide 2 there, where it says overarching reference architecture that brings together existing efforts to define our North Star. And derivative reference architectures that can be implemented, right? So they're actually they're calling it not reference architecture because that's a loaded term. They're calling it like a most likely demonstrative architecture or example architecture. But the idea, those sort of 3 bullet points on slide 2 are the ones that sort of then became, oh, this sounds like we should create a Sterling toolchain, like a set of documents that sort of define what should be happening. And then actual sort of like, these are the tools that fit those needs. And then here are ways that those tools could be strung together with like a glue code to make sure that they could all be sort of managed, collectively, right? Because like I think the biggest issue that has happened in the past, which is one of the reasons why Fresca, some folks have been looking at Fresca, is like, hey, Spiffy Spire is actually not the easiest thing to configure and get set up with everything. But Fresca has configured it almost as if it's one particular, like it's all inclusive of the whole picture. Now, once again, if you were to say, hey, could I integrate Fresca with my existing Spiffy Spire, that's actually a whole set of things that might make it a lot more complicated. But the basic idea there being like, you can imagine, right? Hey, my dev tools should still follow the same policy that my build tools are following, should still follow the same policy that my production gating follows, right? If I don't allow, once again, if I don't allow Go, my dev tool should prevent me from installing Go, let's say. My build tool should prevent me from building or, depending on Go stuff, and my production authorization should say, hey, no, this is a Go app. I'm not gonna deploy that. And so that's kind of where at least like this high level goal of what that would look like. Now, once again, the thing that they're trying to do is just saying, hey, what are some basic like SDLC sorts of things that follow, let's say, NIST SSDF, the CNCF secure supply chain practices guide, the secure software factory reference architecture from CNCF, some of the various, like, there's the node/npm best practices guide coming out of OpenSSF. Like, can we sort of take all of those efforts and start to actually build tooling around it so that different tools that maybe are not natively aware of how to sort of, let's say, integrate those things could still use some of that. Anyway, and once again, that's about as far as it's gotten with the secure, with the Sterling toolchain. I'm still trying to find out more details on, like, is there a project, is there like a community call for this thing? Has it been spun up yet? How can folks get involved? Because it does sound like a pretty big body of work.
Yeah.
So that's once again about it for me. If anybody else has any other things that they wanted to bring up, I know Vitsa, you were doing some stuff with and I also don't know the status of it is now that you are hopefully happily retired.
I'm in active retirement.
Awesome.
Which means that I will do stuff as long as I enjoy doing it. I have a write-up for how we could do policy quotes for Salsa, and it looks like the handful of people that I showed it to, well, they think it's okay. And so my next step would be to implement something, to prototype something that wraps. So this is for NPM ecosystem, is to prototype something that wraps around the existing tools, that does an after the fact check, that whatever is being installed, that it meets some sanity policy checks. Implementing it as a enforcement thing that says, I'm not going to install this. That would require a lot of integration with NPM tooling. That's a bit more work, but the first step would be implement it as a post install check. That's the easy part, and that's enough to audit what's going on. And so that's my next step. And it will keep me off the street for a while.
Awesome. Yeah. I know you shared it in the past, but do you want to just actually, are you comfortable with sharing it with the group?
Yeah, I could. I want to check with Mark.
Sure, no problem.
But yeah, it's in a condition that should be shareable. Yeah, but I don't know if it would be just shared straight away, or if it would be something on Salsa Dev, or so. I have to check that out. All right, that's my update. Thanks for asking.
Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, no, definitely interested in that, and I know that there's some folks who are pushing a lot of the there's still some open questions.
Oh yeah.
There's still some open questions about also from like how much of stuff can actually be verified by some of the tooling, which is an interesting question, because like obviously closed source stuff, it's going to be a little bit harder to, let's say, verify compared to open source.
Yeah, one of my colleagues at Google implemented a substitute attestation that says, when I put all this stuff together, I verified that it met a policy, and if you are willing to believe me, then this is a statement of authenticity that I can make about closed source. It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
It's called VSA. I think it is somewhere on a public document.
Cool. Does anybody else have any updates? Frederick, is the NPM stuff still chugging along?
Yeah, we are going along pretty good with that. I don't think I can share any dates, but fingers crossed, we will see it soon. Maybe one thing that might be related to this, I'm not sure, but a lot of you might be aware of Sigstore, and in particular Fulcio, which is a certificate authority that currently you can integrate via some identity providers. And me coming from GitHub, it's pretty amazing that it's integrated with GitHub Actions, the workload identities we can issue. And some other providers are coming along. I think BuildKite is integrated with Fulcio now. GitLab is definitely trying to get on board, and I think the same is true for Server CI. But as part of that, we're also looking into standardizing the claims that goes into the certificate. The existing one are kind of tailored towards the claims that GitHub Actions expose in the workload identity, but that obviously doesn't work for other CI providers as well. So that is pretty interesting work, and I think it's ready to emerge pretty soon. And it kind of touches base a little bit with Salsa in terms of like capturing build signer URIs and source config URIs, etc. So if you are building on a CI system that's integrated with Fulcio, you will get a lot of related Salsa provenance information in the certificate that most likely will not be forgeable because it's coming, or it's extracted from the signed workload identity from the CI provider, and then Fulcio extracts them and inserts them as extensions into the certificate. Let me grab the link for that PR if you're not aware of that. So I'm inserting it into the document. So everyone should have access to it. But I'm not going to take any credit of it. Like, sure, I've been involved in it, but I think it's relevant for this group as well. If folks are building on Sigstore and trying to do salsa. But yeah, otherwise from NPM, yeah, we're crunching, and hopefully we have something to announce pretty soon.
Cool. Yeah, I know one of the things that also it's been brought up potentially, and something that we want to talk to the Fulcio folks about is, for example, with Fresca, some folks have said, hey, if OpenSSF spun up, let's say a build service that's purely for like some open source projects within the OpenSSF, could we also still use those same things? Use let's say keyless signing by sort of registering that Fresca service with Fulcio. I'm not sure what that would look like exactly, but I know that that's something that is, potentially on the roadmap. What else? I will say also some of the stuff from the Fresca side is mostly hung up on the Tecton and Tecton chains folks integrating a few pieces. The Spiffy Spire work, which has been sort of done now for a little over a year, is still waiting to get merged because of mostly just internal open source politics. So yeah. If there's nothing else, we can probably end it, early. I have to also wrangle some cats to bring them to the vet. And yeah, I'll see you all next week. Unless somebody else has something else. Cool. All right, see you all next week.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.